Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about End of the Road. End of the Road is an American thriller that tells the story of Brenda Freeman, an ER nurse who mourns the death of her husband. With mounting expenses resulting from paying her husband's medical bills, Brenda is forced to move with her family from California to Texas so that they can start over and live a more affordable life. The group initially start off their road trip without a hitch, until their path crosses with that of a murdered drug cartel associate, after which a family member takes a bag of cash from him. The family then has to fight for their lives as they're targeted by a mysterious killer and must deliver the cash to the cartel before time runs out. I have to admit that I had pretty low expectations going into this movie based on its premise, which is probably why I didn't end up hating it as much as I thought I would. It's a typical cheesy cat and mouse thriller that won't blow anyone's minds, but it's entertaining enough to hold one's attention. Queen Latifah plays the lead role of Brenda, and I was surprised with how much depth was behind her as a character. She has a hard time dealing with her husband's death, and this is reflected on occasion as she prays for her husband to give her strength during tough moments in the story. These moments are used sparingly, and they do a good job at conveying Brenda's struggles. She also has to deal with being the primary force that keeps the family together. Between her kids' bratty attitudes and her brother taking the bag of cash which sets things in motion, she has a lot on her plate to deal with, so it's hard not to feel sorry for her. The other characters vary in terms of likability. Brenda's son Cam and daughter Kelly don't contribute that much to the story beyond nagging their mom and being bargaining chips when the story calls for it. They're a bit annoying in the beginning, but they start mellowing out over the course of the story, so they're kind of middle of the road, no pun intended. My favorite character, however, is easily Uncle Reg, who's played by Chris Bridges. He's very laid back and easygoing, which helps alleviate some of the more tense moments in the story, and he has some of the funniest lines in the whole movie. Most of the movie is somewhat light and comedic with its atmosphere. The first act plays out almost exactly like a normal road trip would. The family chat and joke with each other, and in general there's just a relaxing vibe that's present throughout, which does a decent job at setting the foundation for events to follow. There's also a few scenes here and there that add more dramatic depth behind the characters, mostly concerning the loss of Brenda's husband and Reg's lack of life accomplishments. While it's nothing fancy, it still helps the characters stand out more, apart from being just another family. As the road trip proceeded though, I found myself wondering when things were eventually going to kick off. It takes over half an hour for the family to become involved in their predicament, which leaves less than an hour for the rest of the story to take place. For this reason, I found the pacing to be quite slow at the beginning, and then all of a sudden things start ramping up, which was a bit jarring. The flow of events isn't very smooth, and as I hinted at earlier, the actual premise where the family stumbles upon cartel money and argues over what to do with it is pretty ordinary. Because of the erratic pacing, it takes a while for suspense to build up too. The thrills mostly consist of chase sequences and hole-ups where Brenda or someone else goes face to face with a bad guy. They're not all that riveting, but they're okay enough to shake things up to reduce the monotony of the road trip. However, there was one action scene that in my opinion was extremely clumsy in its execution. Brenda and a group of men are fighting for the bag of cash, which is weird because they could easily overpower her, and yet she's only attacked one person at a time. And the whole tussle is filmed with close-ups that make it hard to tell what's happening, other than when Brenda keeps shouting, "Give me my bag!" There wasn't any sort of menace behind the villains, if there even were any. Everyone outside of the family keeps getting terrified at the mere mention of a guy named Mr. Cross, who's associated with the Sinaloa cartel, but he has such a small presence and does so little in the movie itself that he could barely be considered a real threat. The family gets some help from a police captain named J.D. Hammers, who's played by Beau Bridges, but it's pretty easy to see what direction his character arc is going to take. I did like that there were multiple antagonists at play, but any way you slice it, all of them were quite shallow. There is some occasional variety in scenes that provide a nice break from the road trip, such as when the family eats at a diner or goes to a local tourist attraction. They're more of a distraction than anything else, but they are enjoyable while they last, and it's fun to see Uncle Reg goofing around during them. One of the bits that shakes things up is the way racism is explored, and the fact that the characters are a black family who are making their way through a largely white part of the United States. It's understandable that they'd likely encounter some hostility during their travels, and I see where the filmmakers were going with it, but I also couldn't help but feel that it was a bit exaggerated. I don't like dwelling on racial elements in my reviews because they tend to stir up heat in the comments, and honestly, it does make sense that the characters would encounter racism in a rural American setting. I just felt that the way this movie explored it was a bit too over the top to take it seriously. Getting back to the rest of the movie, I liked how desolate the scenery of the desert landscape was as the family went about their journey. Though it doesn't completely overcome the slowness of the first act, it still amplifies the tension of what kind of harm is about to come their way. Even when it's dark, the movie remains creative with its cinematography. It makes use of neon-drenched color hues that add interesting highlights to dark scenes, which make it easier to tell what's happening on screen without ruining the atmosphere of the scenes themselves. Some might argue that the neon colors, the corny dialogue in the family car, and the whole cartel involvement make it ridiculous, and it does, but that's kind of what I like about it. There's a certain cheese factor in its presentation that somehow makes it more appealing than if it were overly serious instead. It does have a meaningful theme to take away from it, albeit one that's basic in approach. It discusses the importance of following dreams and moving on in life when it's necessary. It's nothing too deep, but it still gives the characters a goal to focus on beyond trying to outrun Mr. Cross. Overall, End of the Road is an average road thriller that's deceptively short, technically well made, and unusually comical at times, which make it a strange yet oddly entertaining movie to watch. If you like road movies that have a thriller aspect to them and you don't mind a campy presentation, you might enjoy checking this one out. It's always nice to watch a movie that surpasses expectations, especially low ones. Though this one is far from being a masterpiece, it's still a pretty good time, and I hope it paves the way forward for more cheesy thrillers like these in the future. What did you think about this movie? Were you also surprised by it like I was, or did you find it more disappointing than I did? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of End of the Road. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part where next time I review the French romantic drama No Limit. Bye bye!